Hey, friends. I know that as we look at what's going on in our nation, in the world around us, it can be a little, maybe a lot disheartening and even discouraging. And we can even fall into the trap of finger pointing and be like, God, people have lost their minds. They're so crazy. And these people are doing this and those people are doing that. And I can feel hopeless. But here's the funny thing. God reminded me recently that, Lisa, you used to be one of those people. Yeah, just before I came to know Jesus, it was like I was the one sleeping around. I was the one getting drunk, doing drugs, and whatever else felt good at the time. Very lost. And I just want to say that our time now, believe it or not, isn't a whole lot different from the time when the Apostle Paul wrote to the people in Rome. Now, if you don't know this, he wrote this book called Romans. And he wrote from the city of Corinth, which is basically the Vegas of the day. And he wrote to Rome, which was the military and political powerhouse at the time. Do you get it? Like, it's very similar. And man, they really depended on their intellect. They really prized how academic they were and how they had kind of figured the good life out. So here's this guy, Paul, and he comes along and he is going to say something so absurd to them, so actually revolutionary. They will mock him at times, but this is what he said. I am not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes. You see, it was in a very similar societal context like ours today that Paul says, hey, God sent his son who died on a Roman cross, but then rose from the dead to save us. That was absurd to a lot of them. It's absurd to a lot of people today, but it is the power of God to bring salvation to anyone who will believe. And then Paul goes on to explain that in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. This is the next verse, 17. A righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. It was very important for Paul to explain what righteousness is. Basically, how God created what right is. Because he's going to go on to help people understand, why was the world looking so crazy? It's because God had unleashed his wrath. Okay. God was not going to release his wrath from heaven because there was so much sin. No, it's actually in the reverse. There was so much sin. There's so much sin going on today, because God had already released his wrath. You see, Paul says this in verse 18 of chapter 1 of Romans. People were suppressing the truth by their wickedness. And then Paul went on in verse 21 to say, see, they neither glorified nor gave thanks to God. They did not honor him. They did not see the value in keeping the knowledge of God. Nor did they give thanks. I mean, thanks by definition is you understand how good something is. No, they didn't understand that. And that word truth, this is what they were suppressing. Truth is objective by definition, meaning not influenced by personal feeling or opinion. It is also universal. Truth is universal. What is true in any matter under consideration. And literally by definition, truth is reality. All three of these have been dispensed away with in current society, as it was in Paul's time. Now, is God sitting up there all angry? No, I would say, he is a grieving father who is like, do they not understand I love them? Do they not understand I offer them wholeness? I offer them everything. And that's why he gives us his written word, gives us his truths, because he's not trying to condemn us. He's trying to convict us so we will actually turn back to him. See, he left us a witness in all of creation. It's in verse 20 that we would, in all of creation, see his eternal power and divine nature. It's actually why Hollywood even makes movies with these very attributes. Think of Transformers. They use the Allspark to bring these hunks of metal to life. And they actually say this about the Allspark: a boundless, infinite source of pure cosmic energy that symbolizes Cybertron's very God. Because God left that witness in us. Whether we know him or not, it's intrinsic in our DNA to know there is a God. He is all powerful and he brings life because he wants us to come into that saving relationship with him. So what is this wrath that he has released? Well, basically, he's giving people what they want. He knows we've dismissed him. So he says, okay, you can have what you want. Think the prodigal son. The father had a way better life for the son, but the son couldn't see it. So the father says, okay, go. And the son goes and he tries everything under the sun he thinks will be satisfying. He thinks will fill him up and lead to a life of joy and purpose. But you know what? That son ends up in the slop in the pig pen. And it's the loving Father. It's our loving Father who allows us to live these lives of ruckus partying, doing anything we want, living in the muck and the mire and the pig pen, in hopes that when we see none of this satisfies, our hearts will be turned back to him. But hear this. The reason, I don't want you to get discouraged, that it looks so chaotic right now is because in verse 21, Paul reveals that the people's thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. This is part of the Heavenly Father giving people what they want. You don't want my truth. I'll give you your own subjective truth. Verse 28 and 29, because they thought it was worthless to embrace the true knowledge of God, God gave them over to a worthless mindset to break every rule of proper conduct. Their sinful lives became full of every kind of evil. That's why we can see so much craziness going on in the world around us and think, how are people believing this stuff is good and healthy and right? It's because in the emptiness, in the vacuum left by where God's truth and his wholeness should be, is left every form of senselessness and hate and evil and unrighteousness. That's what we're seeing. And one commentator said it so beautifully. He said this: those who reject what they know of God, in so doing, divorce themselves from truth and reality. Okay. One of the greatest, most beautiful witnesses that God gave us, part of our DNA, is making us male and female. And that is a reflection of his very image. And that is why the enemy is trying so hard to wipe out, completely destroy that image of God being male and female. But here's the good news, and this is what I want us to hear today, that back to verse 16, that it is the gospel, is the power of God for everyone who will believe. Because these people who are living these crazy sin-filled lives, who appear hopeless, you know what? Their lives, that is not God's destiny for them. It's not God's dream for them. No matter how much we call things in our society compassion, love, affirmation, kindness, inclusion. Listen, it is not God's purpose and dreams for people if it does not line up with his definition of covenant marriage, his definition of love, his definition of gender and life and wholeness. See, otherwise it's just a cheap counterfeit. And it's robbing people of actually all he has for them. So listen, this is what I want to say to us today. Let us not condemn the world around us. See, Jesus already said in John 3:18 that the world, or that those who don't know him already stand condemned. So actually what we want to do today is extend his truth and love and reach the lost world around us. So we have to make sure we do not allow evil society to offend us, because it is those very people that he is trying to reach with the good news of the love of his son. So I hope that helps you today to reach all those around you.